All right, welcome back to Schlyde into Sports, live on 103.1 FM on WVLP Radio. I'm your host, Ryan Schlyde, a.k.a. Schlyde, and on the show, we talk about college sports rules and regulations and other relevant sports stories that are happening right now, which right now, we've got NBA Draft and World Cup as the prominent stories going on right now, as well as some more NBA free agency stories, and we're also going to talk a little bit about MLB, at least to talk about one of the most outrageous results that I've seen so far this season. So let's get right into this. Now, as you can probably hear, my voice is a little bit raspy, so we're going to be calling my voice the poor man's Sean McVay impression. It's not a great impression, but Sean McVay is kind of known to talk with a raspy voice a little bit, so here we are. Anyways, so let's go right into the college sports story with the rules and regulations that we've got going on right now. So last week, Ted Cruz and Maria Cantwell, they proposed the Protect College Sports Act, which currently has heavy backing from coaches like Nick Saban. The goal of the bill is to establish a national name, image, and likeness standard, enforce transfer limits, and grant the NCAA antitrust protections. Some of these things we've already talked about on previous broadcasts, or really pretty much all of these things actually we've talked about on previous broadcasts one way or another. A few weeks ago, either at the beginning of June or the week before Memorial Day, we talked a little bit about how the NCAA made a proposal for 5 years and 5 years eligibility with the age restrictions, with the 5 years starting at 19 years old or as soon as you graduate high school. That was one of the main things that we talked about, at least regarding the NCAA's involvement with the, ever since the executive order to help save college sports. I think it was the Save College Sports executive order. I don't remember the exact name of the executive order, but it was something along those lines. But since the executive order, we've been waiting for Congress or the Senate to propose some kind of bill to enforce the executive order, whether it be everything within the executive order or things that are added in due to recent events, like the Brennan Sorsby gambling story that we'd followed for a little bit, which, speaking of which, Brennan Sorsby is kind of out of luck right now because the NFL decided to not do the supplemental draft, and the other, I guess, not necessarily minor leagues, but the other professional leagues that do football, like UFL and those leagues, they are not taking Brennan Sorsby. They're citing that they follow rules and they have ethics, and so they don't want to bring someone like Brennan Sorsby on. So Brennan Sorsby right now has to wait until the 2027 NFL draft, even though he isn't going to be playing as of right now. We don't know if or where he's going to be playing, but right now, Brennan Sorsby is just kind of out there at the moment. At least he's got some money to hold strong and, live his life. But, when it comes to football as a career, he might be out of luck. But anyways, going back to the Protect College Sports Act. So we're going to look at the high-profile testimony, which already talked about Nick Saban, but former Alabama football coach Nick Saban testified before the Senate Commerce Committee, pleading with the lawmakers to bring order to the current mess of NIL and transfer portals, which he argued is shifting the focus from skills to money, or life skills to money, which for me, it's like yes and no, because yes, you do learn life skills in school, but managing money is also a life skill. So it's like they kind of go hand in hand, but at the same time, you can't only just rely on the managing money skill for every other aspect of life. That's not the only thing that's there. And I think that is more what Nick Saban is trying to get at. Because, at least from my point of view, I think college athletes should be paid, especially like just considering the amount of work that they put in addition to school. It's essentially a second job. Like, it's like the amount of time that it takes to go to practice, do the practice, leave practice, do recovery from the practice in addition to school takes away from the athletes being able to do what non-athlete students are able to do, like go get an internship, go work during school, work a job during school, stuff like that. That's something that the athletes don't really have access to, and that's why I think they should get paid, because they are essentially doing a job while they're in school. Some key provisions to the bill: the proposed legislation would create a 5-year eligibility timeline. We already talked about that. It's 5 years and 5 years, starting at either high school graduation or at the age of 19 if the athlete takes a gap year. It would limit student athletes to one transfer without losing eligibility. That's also something that was talked about in the 5 years and 5 years with the NCAA's rules. So right now, as of right now, just looking at the key provisions, it's right in line with what the NCAA has in their rule book, or what they just put into their rule book, which is great, because then the NCAA is going to be able to enforce this without people going to cry to court. Then you've got another provision, which is banning former professional athletes from college play, which that's also something that we've talked about as well with the transfer portal. I've talked about how schools kind of get around that rule by bringing in professional players from Europe to play on their teams. There are many offenders of this rule, but because they're not American professional leagues, that's kind of how they're able to get around it, because there is no specification on what is classified as a professional league. The leagues in Europe, in Asia, in the countries outside of the United States are not, I guess, classified in that. Otherwise, these players would not be able to come over from abroad and be able to play if they were in a professional league. So, yeah, that's something that's going to be a crackdown on, maybe, depending on how they write the rule, with professional athletes, or banning professional athletes from college play, or former professional athletes. The former professional athletes, that kind of more leans into the G League with the NBA. So think about Louisville and Alabama stories back in January and February. When those stories broke, they played in the G League and then they tried to get back into college. So that's also another angle that people have taken to bring talent to their school. And it prevents coaches from abandoning their teams mid-season. So with this one, I think it can be a little bit tricky, because you look at some situations, some coaches leave mid-season. You look at the Miami head coach for the men's college basketball team. I believe it was in November, December, when the now former Miami head basketball coach decided to just leave. He retired kind of out of the blue. He was like, I'm done with this. I'm done with dealing with NIL. I'm done with dealing with recruiting. I'm out. And then the current, I should say, Miami head coach then took over. So that kind of more classifies as abandoning your team mid-season. Something that I don't necessarily think qualifies as abandoning your team mid-season is like James Franklin getting fired from Penn State middle of the season after losing 3 in a row. Lost the Oregon game in overtime. That one, not entirely surprising, but then goes to UCLA. They lose. Then they lose to Northwestern at home. Then James Franklin gets fired. And that's where the athletic department intervened. The athletic director said, hey, don't know what's going on with the team, but people have been calling for your firing for a while now. I've stood by you, blah, blah, blah. And now it's time for you to go. Even though it's midseason, it's time for you to go. There's high expectations. With these 3 losses, we're probably not making it into the playoffs. So, adios. And so James Franklin, is then relieved of his duties at Penn State. And so Penn State was left in a very interesting situation where they could not find a head coach until the end of the season. I mean, there was other coaching jobs that weren't as good as Penn State's, but they were open and people were flocking over there. There was a whole thing with James Franklin's company's agents repping a lot of the coaches, including they did used to rep Nick Saban. So that agency was pretty upset with the way James Franklin was let go, and so they took it out on Penn State by telling the people that they represented to not take the Penn State job. And so that put Penn State in a terrible situation. But that situation, in my opinion, does not classify as James Franklin abandoning the team, because he would have stayed throughout the whole season. He was forced out. So that wasn't his fault. Anyways, it also mandates protections for non-revenue and women's sports. As we've seen throughout the year, we've seen non-revenue sports and women's sports being cut from schools' list of sports that they have. We've seen numerous swimming and diving programs being cut, seen other sports being cut as well, some track and field teams. We've also seen some additions, but we've seen a lot more subtractions than additions because schools are trying to, fit with Title IX while also managing their NIL budget and all that. So it's really tricky, but hopefully with these protections, we'll see less programs getting cut and maybe more investment going into those programs. But yeah, that's pretty much what I was pretty much doing there was just summarizing the importance of each of these provisions that are currently in the bill. And these provisions are currently still up to change because the Big Ten and SEC have opposition to some of the aspects of this bill. The legislation faces a massive hurdle as the two wealthiest and most powerful conferences, SEC and Big Ten, jointly opposed the current version of the bill. They argued the bill leaves critical issues unresolved and does not meaningfully preempt conflicting state laws with a uniform federal standard. So that can kind of go back to the Brendan Sorsby thing. Each state has different gambling laws. Texas has very strict gambling laws. Indiana has some gambling laws. They're not nearly as strict as Texas. Ohio, kind of the same deal as Indiana. But gambling while under 21 is illegal everywhere. You also can look at the NIL budgets. Each state has different ways that they can accumulate NIL. You look at Wisconsin and what they were able to do earlier this year for the football team by using the medical, I believe it was Wisconsin had a state tax that went towards the university to help with their NIL fund. So there's different ways that universities are able to accumulate NIL money. The Big Ten and SEC have been big benefactors. They've been benefiting off of NIL. And what I think is kind of funny with the Big Ten and SEC opposing this is that the Big Ten, I think the Big Ten opposing this makes complete sense because they've been they've been making the most out of the NIL era. They've gotten all kinds of championships. They got the women's March Madness champion. They got the men's March Madness champion. They got the college football champion. I think the only one they didn't get was the baseball champion, but in almost every single sport, the Big Ten won the NCAA championship for it. SEC, not so much, which is kind of unusual. But the SEC has stated before, especially like the schools in Alabama and Mississippi, have said that they aren't able to make as much on NIL, and most people will cite that as, oh, well, because those schools aren't able to make a lot of money, that means the SEC isn't able to make a lot of money. However, you look at some of the other schools within the SEC that are putting up big dollars for their teams. You look at Kentucky, you look at Tennessee, you look at Texas and Texas A&M. Arkansas is another one where they put in a lot of money into their rosters. And they do it a little bit differently. Kentucky and Arkansas put it more in basketball. Texas A&M, Texas, and Tennessee, they're able to put it pretty much anywhere they want to. But the SEC, or at least a lot of people within the SEC, like to say that because Alabama isn't doing as well in college football, that means that the SEC is not benefiting from NIL, which is not true. There's just different teams within the SEC that are benefiting from NIL. But the Big Ten has more teams that are benefiting from NIL, so they're more opposed to the current bill that is being proposed, whereas the SEC maybe is a little bit less opposed, but they are still opposed in some form or fashion. So just looking at it more on the broad side, just people who are currently backing it, the bill is supported by the ACC, Big 12, and major professional leagues, including the NFL, MLB, NBA Players Association, and the NFL Players Association, who all see federal intervention as a necessary way to restore a competitive balance. The reason why I think the Players Associations being cited as voices in support of the bill is relevant is because the players on the Players Association, majority of them, if not all of them, plus or minus a few exceptions. I mean, you look at LeBron, he didn't go to college, but he's still in the NBA. Majority of the people in the Players Association have been to college, and they've all had different kinds of experiences. Some of the players on these associations have pre-NIL experience. Some of them have current NIL experience. Like they know both atmospheres, or at least both environments of college sports, pre-NIL and NIL eras. So I think their input is probably the most valuable, just because they're able to provide some perspective that maybe even coaches like Nick Saban cannot provide, because athletes have much different experiences than coaches do, and coaches prioritize different things in their experiences than maybe players do. So I think right now it's a very interesting situation. I think the way that it's currently trucking along, I don't think it will get done in time for this year. It is going to have to be, again, it's going to have to be bipartisan, and that always is an issue with pretty much everything. It's pretty hard to get anything passed in a bipartisan way, especially now. It seems like, at least in the political world, it just continues to get more and more hostile. So I don't expect it to really be rushed through. The fact that it has bipartisan support from Cruz and Cantwell, I think, is at least a start, but I don't think it's but I think it's going to take more than two senators, one from one side and one from another side, in order to have it be bipartisan, or at least pass bipartisanly. So, I mean, we'll see what happens, but there's only a month and a half left until the next fall season of college sports starts. That's not a lot of time to get a bill passed. It's really not. I mean, it takes a long time for a bill to get passed. Even if it gets passed by both houses of Congress, it still has to go through the executive branch. If Trump vetoes it, it goes back to Congress, and it takes more time. So there is no guarantees right now, but we at least have a current idea of what the bill looks like, and now we have a name for the bill. So that's another thing as well. All right, with that being said, let's talk a little bit about the NBA. We've got some free agency stuff. So this is pretty huge, depending on how you look at it. Whether you're looking at it as a last run for four of the greatest players to grace the basketball court of all time to play on one team, or whether you're rooting for Team Unk, which, because these are four of the oldest players in the NBA currently. So let's get into this. So Draymond Green officially declined a $27.7 million player option to become an unrestricted free agent. This opened up the Warriors' budget to create the Big Four, which would include Stephen Curry, Draymond Green, LeBron James, and Anthony Davis. This definitely was a coordinated plan between Draymond Green and the Warriors department, or at least the front office, management, what have you. I think they're trying to go on a last run. Draymond has always wanted to be on a team with LeBron. He has said so for a while now. He knows that he's on his last years. They all kind of know that they're on their last years. Anthony Davis can never stay healthy. Anthony Davis is also at Washington, and Washington is kind of they're a really bad team, even with Anthony Davis on there, but it's just, they've never been good for a while. Even when Michael Jordan was on Washington, they were just not good. Washington Wizards are cursed. I don't know what it is, but they're just cursed. But they're trying to clear up enough cap room to offer LeBron James the $15 million non-taxpayer mid-level exception. For Davis, they're probably going to have to trade Jimmy Butler with some draft compensation to get Anthony Davis. Green is not expected to leave Golden State, and is instead the move set stage for him to re-sign a longer-term deal and at a lower annual salary, opening up the immediate room the team needs to make these blockbuster acquisitions. So, again, it was 100% a coordinated effort between Draymond and Golden State, the front office. 100%. I don't think there's really any doubt towards that. And frankly, I don't necessarily think that Draymond is too worried about money, because he makes money outside of the NBA, like outside of his contract. So, sometimes you just gotta take a pay cut if you want to win. I mean, look at Jalen Brunson and the New York Knicks this year. Jalen Brunson took a pay cut, and New York was able to assemble a team that was good enough to win the NBA Finals. Not only good enough, but also deep enough. And that is where I'm kind of curious, because if the Warriors do have to trade away draft capital and Jimmy Butler, I think their future is kind of gone. And maybe they get one more run, but then Warriors fans are going to be stuck with the Warriors kind of being trash for a little while. For the draft, I'd say for the most part, teams made the smart decisions. I'd say Golden State probably could have gotten away with picking up Ademara. Yaxel Lendenborg, he is a great pick. I think he's going to fit in well there, but letting Oklahoma City have Ademara that's going to cause some chaos in the West there. I think Cameron Boozer falling to number 3, I was a little bit surprised. AJ DeBansta, I mean, I'm not necessarily surprised he was number one. Debansta, Peterson, and Boozer were all three kind of in that contention for number one to play for Washington. We already talked about last week how Darren Peterson was expecting to play for Washington, but would not be upset if he got drafted by Utah. And frankly, I think Cameron Boozer going to Memphis might actually be a better fit for him. Washington picking up Debansta, not a bad player, but I did like Cameron Boozer the best going into this draft, just the way he is all around. He's got the height, he can shoot, he's able to drive into the basket, like he's able to do everything. So, or at least from what I saw this season, he was able to do it efficiently and consistently. Whereas, Peterson cramps up every once in a while. Like he wasn't really able to play full games. Debansta, I don't think we really got to see him shine necessarily in the college basketball season, simply because I think he was far and away the best player on that roster at BYU. So maybe Washington did make the smart pick, but ultimately I think they did make a little bit of a gamble. But if Washington is trying to build their future around Debansta, I think that is the smart move. Maybe they do trade away Anthony Davis to allow that to happen over the course of the next few years, kind of like what Oklahoma City did after they let go of Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook and James Harden. All right, so before we take the break, we're going to talk a little bit about the White Sox with the most outrageous outcome that I've ever seen in the MLB this season so far. They played Kansas City on Friday at Guaranteed Rate Field in Chicago and absolutely thumped them 22-1. It was a completely dominating performance by the White Sox. They scored 10 runs in the third inning, 1 in the fourth, 2 in the fifth, 4 in the sixth, and 5th in the 7th. And because Kansas City started off at bat, they didn't even need to do anything in the 9th inning. Kansas City only scored 1 run in the 4th inning. After that, it was just the Sox show. It was just the Sox show. They, again, just absolutely demolished them. Antonacci got 2 runs. Vargas got 2 runs. Teal got 2 runs. Benintendi got 2 runs. Perez got 1. Montgomery got 1. Acuna got 1. Maydroff got 3. Montgomery got 2. Peters got 3. And Gonzalez got 3. So the love was just spread around between everybody that was at bat for the Chicago White Sox. That is for sure. But yeah, again, an absolute thumping of the Kansas City Royals. Chicago White Sox are currently on top in the American League Central. Not by too much, though. Not by too much. The White Sox are 44-39. Guardians are right behind them at 44-41. So Guardians are about 2 games behind them right now. So still could fall down 1, maybe even 2 spots, because the Twins are 41-45. So they're within striking distance as well at this point of the season. So we'll see what happens. But Chicago White Sox have been playing some pretty great baseball the past few weeks. So wouldn't be too surprised if they're able to hold on to that top spot in the American League Central, which really hurts me to say as a Cubs fan, because we're supposed to hate them. But, I'm one of those people where I'll give credit where credit is due. So, yeah, it is what it is. It is what it is, guys. It is what it is. But before we talk about the World Cup, and there is a lot to talk about with the World Cup, we're going to take a short little break and hear a message from our sponsor.
This broadcast is brought to you by Authentic Impact, a Northwest Indiana executive coaching practice working with family businesses to ensure their legacy. When you started your business, you made a promise to do things differently, better than anyone else. Over time, as the business grows, that promise can get diluted or even lost. Penny Schlyde at Authentic Impact helps family business owners reignite that promise weaving it into team engagement, performance, and hiring so your passion becomes the heartbeat of your company again. Learn more at authentic-impact-coaching.com.
All right, so like I said a little bit before, we are about 4 games into the knockout rounds, but before we talk a little bit about those games, we're going to talk about the teams that did make it in. So the teams that made it in, we've got Germany, Paraguay, France, Sweden, South Africa, Canada, Netherlands, Morocco on the upper left side of the bracket. I'm currently looking at the Fox Sports bracket. Then on the bottom left, you've got Portugal, Croatia, Spain, Austria, United States, Bosnia, Belgium, and Senegal. Top right, you've got Brazil, Japan, Ivory Coast, Norway, Mexico, Ecuador, England, and Congo. And then the bottom right, you've got Argentina, Cape Verde, Australia, Egypt, Switzerland, Algeria, Colombia, and Ghana. So a team that got left out that was kind of surprising to me was Korea. They played a really good first game, but after that, they just kind of fell off, and that happens sometimes. Something else that I also found pretty surprising is the teams from Africa doing as well as they're doing. And the reason why I say this is because at the last World Cup in, I believe it was 2022 in Saudi Arabia, where Morocco was the first team from the continent of Africa to make it in to the semifinals. And so now we're seeing an even bigger showing from the country of Africa, bringing in, Morocco, Senegal, Ghana, Algeria, Egypt, Congo, Ivory Coast. Like, you've got 7 teams, I think, out of 9 teams that made the World Cup. That's pretty incredible for a singular continent. Now, we do already have a couple of upsets that have happened in the World Cup with these knockout games. So, first team to move on was Canada. They beat South Africa 1-0. That's not necessarily a surprise there. But upset number 1, which happened yesterday, was Morocco over Netherlands. This went to PKs. Morocco made 3 PKs. Netherlands made 2. This game was quite chippy, to say the least. Both teams were very physical. And that's kind of a theme that's been going on, at least so far, that I've seen in this knockout round. Not a lot of calls have been made, but I don't necessarily hate that. I kind of like it when it's a little bit more physical. Kind of like with football being a little less soft on some calls versus others. I think, having that balance to allow that physicality to shine, I think, is good. But in the Netherlands versus Morocco, there definitely was times where it felt like the refs lost a little bit of control, at least at the beginning in the first half. But yeah, both these teams had hopes to make it to the semifinals, maybe even finals, as dark horses, but Morocco ends up getting the win. Then we've got Germany versus Paraguay, and Paraguay gets the win. And frankly, I'm surprised because when we beat Paraguay, it was, oh, pish posh, it's just Paraguay, no big deal, right? But Paraguay ended up drawing Germany in regulation and in extra time. They took it to free kicks, and Paraguay made it. Well, Paraguay made 3. Germany made 3 with the 5 free kicks, and then Germany missed their 6th free kick. Germany made their 6th free kick, which gave Paraguay the win. And Germany, the crazy thing about this game is that Germany had control for probably 98, 99% of the game. I mean, if you look at the chart of the game and which way the momentum was swinging, Germany had complete control of that game, except for the one moment towards the beginning of the second half where Paraguay scored. In the first half, it was 0-0. Paraguay scores early in the second half, and then Germany follows that up almost towards the end of the second half. absolutely insane. And Paraguay, the way they were able to defend Germany, they pretty much just were waiting for Germany to make a mistake. And ultimately, that's what happened. And that resulted in Paraguay getting their win. Another game that happened, Brazil, Japan, that one ended in regulation. It did not go to penalty kicks. The Netherlands, Morocco, and Germany, Paraguay games were the only two yesterday that went to penalties. Brazil, Japan, Brazil won 2-1. Japan, very quick team. Brazil, I think they just had that deeper roster. Obviously, they have Neymar. That's a big name. And, Neymar has a lot of World Cup experience. And they're going to play the winner of Ivory Coast and Norway, which whoever wins this match, I think will be very interesting because Norway, obviously, they have the iconic striker Erling Haaland. And there have been so many memes made about him hunting the person who has the ball. And those have been extremely funny. Just the way he runs after people, like some of the pictures that were captured in the Norway versus Iraq game, in the group play games, that was hilarious. It was so funny. But yeah, Brazil's gonna have to play the winner of those two teams. Ivory Coast with a pretty rock solid defense. They were able to hold Germany for a little bit up until the very end in group play. So I think that game will be a very interesting one to watch. And yeah, those are the only games so far that have been played in the knockout rounds so far. The games that are going to be happening today, Norway, Ivory Coast, that game is actually going to be concluded by the time the broadcast is over today. And yeah, I'm not even going to really get a chance to talk about the outcome of the game because broadcast is going to be over. But we've also got Mexico versus Ecuador. That's going to be a pretty big one. What else do we have today? We've got France versus Sweden. I think that's going to be a pretty sneaky game, or a sneakily close game. France should probably still win. And I think that's all that we've got today. Something else that I saw brought up, at least on social media, is the funny thing about the World Cup schedule, and that being that the United States is playing their game July 1st against Bosnia, and July 1st is Canada's Independence Day. It's Canada Day, and Canada is playing their game against Morocco in the round of 16 July 4th, which is American Independence Day. So I don't know who was doing all the scheduling at FIFA, but how funny is that, right? But yeah, just some other matches that I think, just kind of going into some other matches that I think could be quite interesting. Colombia is one where I think they could possibly make a not round of 16 run, but a quarterfinal run. I think Colombia is set up to possibly make a quarterfinal run. They're going up against Ghana on Friday, and then they're going to play either Switzerland or Algeria on Tuesday, July 7th, so next week. And I think those are teams that Colombia could absolutely beat. I mean, Colombia was able to hold Portugal to a draw, and Portugal, they have Ronaldo, right? I mean, Ronaldo's one of the best strikers in the world. I'm not going to say he is the best striker in the world because, well, he's not, or at least I don't think he is. But no offense to Ronaldo by any means. I just think that Messi's better, but that's just my opinion. But anyways, I think Colombia is, the way the bracket's set up, they can make a run into the quarterfinals. Paraguay at this point could maybe even make a run to the quarterfinals. They'd probably have to get past France, which I don't think is likely. I think France will probably make it to the quarterfinals. They'll probably play Morocco. That's my early prediction there. I could see Senegal beating Belgium, possibly. Belgium has had a pretty inconsistent World Cup so far. They were able to win their group, but it was not easy for them to win their group, despite being one of the top 5 ranked teams going into this tournament. So I think Belgium versus Senegal could be interesting, which could lead to a favorable path for the United States if they beat Bosnia and Herzegovina. So could be interesting. It could be very favorable to the United States, and the United States would then play either Spain, Austria, Portugal, or Croatia, which any one of those teams is going to be a tough matchup besides maybe Austria. I think the U.S. would most likely beat Austria, but Croatia, they made it to the quarterfinals last year. Already talked about Portugal having Ronaldo. In Spain, they were one of the best teams heading into this, and it seemed like they found their rhythm towards the end of the group play. So maybe Spain found their rhythm at the right time, and maybe they meet the United States in the quarterfinals. But right now, I think if the United States was to beat either Spain, Austria, Portugal, or Croatia, it would be the first time since 2002 that they would have made it past the quarterfinals, which is huge. This is huge for the United States. Kind of moving on to the other parts of the brackets now. I think Ecuador can be kind of a sneaky team. Mexico and Ecuador are both very sneaky teams. I think Mexico pretty underrated going into this tournament. They completely dominated their group. They won all 3 of their games. That should not go unnoticed at all. I don't think that should go unnoticed at all. They beat a very quality South Korea team. I do still think that South Korea win was a really strong win for Mexico. Ecuador, they themselves have had a pretty great run in this tournament so far. Just looking at the group play right now, Ecuador, they drew Curacao, but they beat Germany. They did lose to Ivory Coast, but they beat Germany at the end of their group play after drawing to Curacao. So I think Ecuador could capitalize on that momentum of beating Germany, but Germany also just lost to Paraguay. So maybe Germany just had a bad past couple of games. Maybe Mexico goes in and beats them. So we'll see what happens. I think it's going to be a very feisty match. Both teams are very aggressive when they're playing. When they're playing in football, or I should say soccer. Wow, World Cup has me calling soccer football now. What are we doing? Anyway, England, that's a team that I think could maybe be a dark horse as well. Their path relatively favorable. I could see England making a run to the quarterfinals. Just looking at their path, they play Congo, which I think they should win that one. Then they would play either Mexico or Ecuador. That'll be a pretty tough game for them, but I think they probably would still come out on top of either. Less so Mexico, more so Ecuador. I think they would probably lose to Mexico, but if they happen to play Ecuador, then I think England would probably win that one. And then in the quarterfinals, they would play either Brazil, Ivory Coast, or Norway, which any of those teams I think could present a pretty interesting challenge to England. But England does have a pretty solid amount of depth right now. So they could maybe make it past the quarterfinals and get into the semis, which there's a lot of teams that they could be playing in the semifinals. So, yeah, I'm not going to draw any more conclusions now, at least about England. I don't want to get too ahead of myself on England, but I do think they're a pretty underrated team in this tournament right now. Then moving on to, I guess, the bottom of the bracket if you're looking at it on Google. I already talked about Colombia. Honestly, I think what'll probably happen, and this is a pretty early prediction, but I'm thinking that in the quarterfinals, it's going to be Colombia versus Argentina. I don't think that's too far-fetched to say at all. Egypt and Australia, I think Argentina should beat either of them pretty easily. I don't think Cabo Verde is going to present too much of a challenge to Argentina. I think they should win pretty handily. Colombia should get past Ghana. Not necessarily sure about Switzerland and Algeria, but I think Colombia could at least give them a run for their money, at least draw them and beat them in penalties, and then meet up with Argentina in the quarterfinals. But yeah, right now I'd say the teams that I'm liking the most this World Cup: Morocco, France, US, Croatia, Norway, England, and Colombia, and obviously Argentina. That it'd be stupid of me not to favor Argentina. Argentina's had a pretty, they did win their group pretty handily. I might add, like it was they won all three of their games in group play as well. Goal differential was 7. I mean, they had one of the highest group differentials out of the top finishers in the groups. The only team that was higher than Argentina was France, but I think France kind of had the luxury of beating up on Senegal and Iraq for a majority of their points, and then Norway, they did not even put out their full starting lineup for the French game because they already knew they were in, so they were like, oh, we'll just take second place in the group and then just go from there, which might cost Norway because, like I said before, Ivory Coast, that is not an easy team to play at all. So it really depends. It really depends. But yeah, just not a very easy slate for Norway that they've set themselves up for. Because now they play Brazil in the second round, or at least in the round of 32. So yeah, pretty crazy stuff with the World Cup. And like I said before, it's been super fun following the social media post with the World Cup. Obviously, I already talked about Scotland putting cones on top of the statues in Boston last week. That was pretty funny and cool. But there is one thing that we did lose with Germany losing World Cup that is quite unfortunate. And let's see. And his Twitter, so it's Freddie. So Freddie is a viral German soccer fan who has cross-country road tripped throughout the 2026 World Cup, and he's captured the hearts of us online. Known simply as Freddie, he's posted his journey on TikTok, on Twitter, probably on Instagram too, but I've only really seen it on Instagram and Twitter, TikTok and Twitter. But throughout his journey, he would post tweets just kind of reacting to certain things like Waffle House or the hotels they stayed in, or asking, like, just posting map routes on Twitter, being like, hey, like, should I take this route? Should I take this route? What will give me the best experience of the country of America? And like, he would just post all kinds of stuff like that on the socials. He also called Taco. So he traveled the American South in a rental car and gave reviews of certain American staples. He called Taco Bell the Holy Land and declared Waffle House a 10 out of 10, and then went overwhelmingly viral. His social media account exploded into a massive hospitality contest and received VIP treatment across the entire country, including an invite from J.J. Watt to a luxury Houston hotel, a private jet charter from AirShare CEO John Owen, and a personal tour of NASA's Johnson's Space Center, and tickets to meet country singer Ella Langley. And for those of you that don't know who Ella Langley is, she recently became a country sensation. I believe one of her most popular song was, it's about Texas. Hold on, what's it called? What is it called? Choosing Texas. That's what it was called. I was gonna say Win in Texas. I'm like, it's not Win in Texas, but the song is called Choosing Texas. And I think how that came about was Freddie heard the song on the radio. He was like, I don't know who Ella Langley is, but this is good. This song's really good. And then Ella Langley responded to one of his tweets later on, like a few days later, and then invited him to meet her backstage, which, I mean, that's absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. But beyond Freddie's personal road trip, there was thousands of German supporters that traveled throughout North America for the tournament, and they transformed major tourist and transit hubs, including turning New York City's Times Square into a sea of black, red, and gold, and packing venues like the one in Auburn, Alabama. For the global audience, the heartwarming reception of German and other European tourists by locals became a major feel-good sub-story of the World Cup, heavily featured on U.S. and international news networks. And each of these news networks have approached this story in their own way, but I haven't really looked too deeply into those news stories. I've just been trying to follow what's been going on social media, because that's a lot more fun, and it kind of removes the agenda BS out of it, essentially. So, yeah. And there's been other, meme accounts that have been posting online about the World Cup and making jokes about how, America's not as bad as, the media makes it out to be, or like, why do people hate Americans? Americans are actually pretty cool. And like, just collectively online, it's just been kind of agreed upon that the politicians are the ones that are the problem, which I found really funny, but also I also find that completely true. So, I just the way that people interact, like just events like this kind of opens up our eyes into the fact that, we all come from different places and we all have different experiences, but, we're all the same in the sense that we are all of planet Earth, essentially. And, a majority of us hold the same values and things like that. So, yeah, like that's part of the reason why I like watching World Cup and the Olympics, just because it brings that back. Like, obviously it brings that back, but also just the competitive nature within each of these events. Like, you look at the Olympics, like Australia and US and the United States have this huge rivalry that has lasted for years at the Olympics, at least in the sport of swimming. Like, it's lasted for a really long time, and that rivalry it's kind of extended into soccer as well. I mean, with the United States-Australian game, people were talking about the rivalry a little bit, not just with the sport of swimming in the Olympics, but also in soccer. And, people making jokes about how Australians hate Americans because we always seem to beat them for the most part, and then we don't like them because they'll beat us. And it's just, like one of those kinds of rivalries. Not necessarily a bad rivalry because, we are allies with Australia, and politically we don't hate Australia or anything, but it's one of those friendly rivalries where we're just ultra competitive with each other in our sports, which I think that's kind of cool. I think that's kind of a cool rivalry to have. And then, you look at other rivalries too. Like you look at the United States and Canada in hockey, which it's always been there, but it's been kind of revived due to the recent success of the United States and the sustained success of the Canadians. So seeing that now kind of play out in the World Cup, where most people assume that, the United States normally isn't very good at soccer or football. Canada normally isn't that great at soccer or football either, but both countries are now in the knockout rounds, which is kind of insane. Mexico and the United States, at least, were on top in their groups. I don't remember if Canada was on top of their group. Let's go check. Nope, Canada was not on top of their group, but they did technically pull ahead of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So, all three host countries finished in the top two in their groups, which is pretty huge for both. It's pretty huge for both. And, again, there's just a lot of excitement that is currently surrounding this World Cup, not only because it's hosted by three different countries, but also just, everybody being able to travel. I think just the way that the World Cup was set up with the amount of stadiums that it has, it really set up for a better travel experience for tourists of the host country, which I think is incredible. It's incredible, but also I think it's also necessary. I think it was also definitely something that was very necessary in order to kind of bring us all together, especially when, it's been pretty hostile the past few years. It's been pretty hostile the past few years. So, yeah. It's definitely a breath of fresh air, to say the least. But, yeah. All right. So, that's all that we got time for today. Next week, going to be talking more World Cup for sure. I'll keep you guys updated on the Draymond Green deal, whether or not they're able to get both LeBron James and Anthony Davis, which if they were able to do that, that would be a pretty interesting reunion now that I think about it, because LeBron got Anthony Davis traded away to Dallas. So pretty interesting reunion that it would be, and the assembling of Team Unk, as it is now being referred to online. I think that would be it'll be interesting. It'll definitely be interesting to see how that all plays out. That's for sure. We're also going to give you updates on the Save College Sports Act, or Protect College Sports Act, whether or not that moves through to the other house, whether it moves from the Senate to the House, whether just the progress of the bill and how far along it is to becoming a law. And any other NBA free agency news, also going to have some updates with that. And of course, with no surprise, we're also going to have some World Cup updates as well. Some instant reactions, because sometimes the games happen the games are going to happen the day before the broadcast. So there will be some pretty instant reactions on next week's episode. So stay tuned. And yeah, if you weren't able to make it, or if you joined in after 2:00 and want to go back and listen to the beginning of the broadcast, you can always go and listen on Spotify, Millions.co, YouTube, Patreon, and other podcasting platforms. search up Schlyde in Sports, and it'll be there. And with that being said, I will see you guys all next week. Schlyde out.